Hello, so in this video we are going to look at how to approach the how fully question. This particular question comes from the 2024 exam paper and it's question 17 of the era of the Great War topic. So we're going to look at a method that we can use to apply to any of the how fully questions, whether it's asking us to describe or explain. In this particular case, we want to start by reading the topic and the question so that we know what we're reading the source for, before we even read the source itself. So I'm just going to note down there, we're looking at the use of technology on the Western Front between 1914 and 1918. And again, it tells us this down here. And of course, we've got the questions down how fully, it's asking us to describe. But like I've said, it doesn't really matter whether it's telling us to describe or explain. We're going to approach this in the same way. So now that we know what we're reading for, we can go on to the source itself. It's quite a short wee source, which is great. And most of what is here will be useful to us, but be aware there will be some sentences, some points that are not about the use of technology on the Western Front. These sentences we can call distractors, and they're there to make sure we're actually reading the question and that we can actually apply the skill. So you want to get your highlighters out and have a look at the source. We can see here it tells us that one military tactic used before the Great War, so again, it's not only technology in the Western Front, but it's 1914 to 1918. So before the Great War was the cavalry charge. I'm not going to highlight that because, of course, it doesn't tell us about technology on the Western Front between 1914 and 1918. The next sentence tells us, however, technology led to different weapons being used in the war, and then we get this first sentence here. One weapon was poison gas that blew into opposing trenches and forced soldiers out of their defences. I'm going to highlight that because it's about a new technology, poison gas, and it tells us what it was used to do. Now you can pause the video here and see if there's anything else that you would highlight before we carry on. So I've gone ahead and I've highlighted anything that tells me about the use of technology on the Western Front, and hopefully you've got something that looks similar in front of you. You can see most of the source is actually quite useful to us, and I have highlighted 4 separate sentences, and each sentence, again, like I say, suggests something about the use of technology on the Western Front. However, it's important to note that you can only get 3 marks out of the 6 for what you find in the sources, depending of course on how you use that, and we'll get to that when we write our answer. But please don't try and use all 4. But if you have no knowledge that you can bring to this question, which unfortunately we do have to do to get all 6 marks, and that makes it a bit harder. But if you have no knowledge to bring to this question, you can still get half marks by looking at, or mentioning, just what is in the sources there. So that makes this quite handy. Now, to begin our answer, I'm going to make an overall judgment about how fully source A describes the use of technology on the Western Front between 1914 and 1918, because that is the question that is being asked, and if I don't provide a judgment, the most I can get is 2 marks out of the 6. So by providing an overall judgment, I'm unlocking the rest of the marks. I could write a fantastic answer, but without this judgment being included at some point in my answer, it doesn't have to be at the start, it can come at the end, but if I don't include it, I'm capping myself at 2. So I'm going to start by writing overall source A only partly describes the use of technology on the Western Front 1914 to 1918. Now, by saying only partly, I am making a judgment, and then I'm using the rest of the question stem to answer that question. It's important you do that because, of course, that is what the question is about. But so long as you pay attention, you're really just copying the words from the question there, and you should get the marks. So, on to my first point I'm going to make, purely from the source. I'm going to say source A tells us that mustard gas was used to burn and blind soldiers. Now, that quote by itself, although it is an accurate point to be making here, it's not worth anything. We have to provide a bit of interpretation. So I'm going to use the phrase, this means that, and I'm going to show my understanding to kind of prove that I know what I'm talking about. So this means that mustard gas was used to stop enemy soldiers from being able to see. And that wee comment just shows my examiner that I've understood the relevance of the quote, the point of taking from source A, and that will get me 1 mark. So as you can see here, I've just continued that process, applying the technique to another 2 quotes that I'd highlighted on source A. Now, hopefully that's going to get me some marks. Again, I can get a maximum of 3, or there's 3 marks I can make, from just looking at the source. But if I want to get any more marks, if I want to get full marks, I'm going to have to talk about points of omission. So this is just anything the source doesn't tell us about technology that I've revised and that I can tell my examiner. So I'm just going to start with, however, source A fails to tell us that machine guns were used on the Western Front, just keeping it with the question, and could fire hundreds of bullets every minute. So I've got a specific fact there about machine guns. So for me to get my marks, what I want to do is give it another 2 points of knowledge about technology on the Western Front that wasn't included in that source. And finally, I've got my completed answer here in front of you. You can see I've started with an overall judgment. It doesn't matter where that judgment comes, it can come at the end as well. I've just decided to start with it, and that unlocks more than 2 marks. If I don't have that judgment, I can get a maximum of 2. I've then used 3 quotes from the source with some interpretation. Hopefully this will get me my 3 marks. And then finally, I've got another 3 points that the source has omitted or didn't mention, failed to tell us about. And I've looked at machine guns, tanks and aircraft, none of which source A mentions. It's important here to note again, if I don't include my own knowledge, these points of omission, things that the source doesn't mention, I'm going to be capped at 2 marks. So even though I've got my judgment and I've written 3 points of interpretation from source A, if I don't have those final 3 sentences there, I'm going to be capped at 2. So it's a bit of advice when you're in your exam and you come across a how fully question and you're struggling to apply your own knowledge to it. Try and at least give 1 point of knowledge, 1 point of omission from the source, and hopefully that'll be enough to unlock an extra couple of marks from your source interpretation. So now that you have gone over this, now that you know how to do it, try any other how fully question, see if you can apply the skill and see how well that you do. Good luck!